Hello everyone, welcome to our Renegade to Ready for Work resume writing workshop. I'm Danielle Ryle. I am an English instructor here at Somerset Community College at the main campus and at McCreary, so if you travel around you might see me. And thank you for joining us all today. Hopefully you'll be able to get the start on the resume that'll get you the job that you're looking for. Okay, let's get started. From Renegade to Ready for Work, Basics of Resume Writing. The first step in writing your resume needs to be concerned with format, how to just set up the basics of the page. The first thing that you want to keep in mind is that your resume should only be one page long. It's important to make a quick introduction to yourself and to keep it to just the first side of a single sheet of paper. Of course, unless the company that you're looking at asks you for something longer. One page is the good default, and as you're starting to build your first resume, try to keep it to that one page maximum. The other important thing to consider is the software that you're using as you work through the setup of your resume. If you don't have Microsoft Word on your home computer already, you want to get access to that piece of software, or you can download a program called OpenOffice. You'll see the full URL web address on the screen. You can type that in. It'll take you to where you can download OpenOffice. OpenOffice is essentially the closest you can get to Microsoft Word for free as a program that you can download online. This will help you keep formatting the same throughout your entire resume, as well as to follow the directions that we'll be looking at as we go through our sample. The next thing that you want to think about as far as format with your resume is what kind of font you're going to use. Microsoft Word is great in that it offers us a wide variety of different font styles to suit the mood or the tone of what we're creating. But when we're working in a resume, we want to keep something that is essentially normal or very plain font. The two that are the go-tos that have been around for a while are Times New Roman and Courier New. They resemble often what we'll see as a typewriter, and they're just very plain fonts. Also, more and more we're seeing the use of Calibri. That's the font that the most recent version of Microsoft Word uses as a default. And this presentation is presented in Calibri. So you can see it is just a very plain, very easily readable font style. You want to make sure that once you choose your font, you use it consistently. Make sure that you format everything in the exact same font style once you choose from those three. Another thing that you want to be consistent with is the indentation and the number of bullets in your lists. Now you'll see the bulleted lists as we get further into the work experience part of your resume, so just hold that in the back of your mind for now. But you also want to be consistent with your indentation. You want different parts of your resume to line up with other parts that are similar, and you'll see that as we begin to look at the example resume in later slides. Perhaps the most important thing, and what you will be hearing again and again throughout this presentation, will be to consider how to tailor your resume for each job you're applying for. To do this, you may want to keep what we refer to as a master resume, where you list out every single job that you've ever had with all the responsibilities that you met while you were working that job, just to use as a template for any future job-specific resumes that you put together. As we get into our resume, remember it just needs to be one page. That means we can't include everything that we've done if we have a long work history or a detailed educational background. But it's good to keep all that stuff in one master file and then just cut and paste, adjust it into single one-page resumes that fit the individual jobs. Okay, part 2 of this is going to be the format and the content of our resume. We'll look at each stage, each step in the process, and how it will actually appear on the screen as you're working in Microsoft Word. The very first thing that you need on your resume is a way to introduce yourself to your potential employer. You need to include all of your contact information. You should include at the top of your resume, here you'll see it centered so that it really stands out, but it'll be the same font size and style as the rest of the piece. You will need your name, your address, your phone number, and your email address. The one important thing to note here before we move on from your contact information is to make sure that you use a professional email address. You may have an email right now that's your personal email, that's something silly, a nickname or part of a song lyric, or something that you like to use for fun, that your friends associate with who you are. But when you're starting a resume and a job hunt, you want to make sure you have a professional email. One of the easiest ways to set up a new email account, if you do not currently have an email address that you consider professional, is to go on Google and go to Gmail. On Gmail you can set up as many email addresses as you want for free, and you have access to it on any computer as long as it can get online. Choose for your email address some version of your name, as close as you can get to it of your actual name. If you have a very common name, your name may be taken already, but try to get it as close to your name as you can. What's also good about having a professional email account is that you know all the messages that show up there are going to be related to your job search. Anything that's from your personal life will go to your personal email account, and anything related to jobs will go to your more professional sounding email address. Check that account often, because you'll know anything that shows up there is potentially a contact from a future employer. The next part of your resume is a bit more flexible. You want it to be either your education or your work experience. We'll decide on which of these two things to put next by looking at the job listing. For our purposes here, we're going to include education as our second step in our resume. You will choose education if the job listing says that the degree you're working towards or that you've already earned is either required or preferred for the job you're applying for. This means that you want to make sure that your employer knows you have the required education from the very first step. It's a way to set yourself apart if the education background is just preferred, and it's a way to make sure that you aren't discounted if the education is required. If we choose education to be the next part of our resume, we will list out 3 different aspects of the educational background. We should include our degree, or possibly also our major if the major is important to the job we're looking at. We will include the name of the school where we attended, and we will include the dates of attendance, or at least the date when we graduated. Now this is referring to our college background. If we're working on our college degree, or if we've already achieved that degree, all we need to focus on in our education section will be our college education. We should not include any information about high school or GED if we're already working towards our college degree or already have our college degree. If we're in college, any employer is going to assume that we successfully completed high school and got our diploma, or that we were able to attain our GED. So we won't worry about that information. We'll stay focused on college. So let's take a look at how this will appear as we continue to build our resume in Microsoft Word. So you can see at the top of the page we still have our contact information, and then directly under that we have a little subtitle that says Education. This is labeling this section and providing a way for anyone who's reading this resume to immediately know what kind of information they're going to get next. So under Education we have one piece of information listed. It's as if we were working here at the college towards our Associate in Arts. You can see that first. Associate in Arts, that's our degree. Then we have the name of the college. We're using the college here, Somerset Community College. And then for the date of graduation, you'll see it might look a little bit different than what you expected. It says expected spring 2013. So this is assuming that we're going to graduate in the spring, but have not yet. If we had already graduated, we would just include the season and the year of graduation, and we would leave that expected off. But even if you haven't achieved your degree yet, you want to make sure that you tell your employers when you will have it. They might still be interested in hiring you, even if you haven't completed that degree just yet. The next part of our resume will be the opposite of what we did the last time. So in our next position, we will include either experience or education. Again, we're going to choose which one of these to come next by looking at the job listing, the ad where we initially saw this position was open. For our purposes, we're going to choose experience since we used education last. If we choose experience for our next position, what we want to do is list our job title or position at the company, the name of the company or the employer, and the dates while we were employed there. So similar to the same three things we would list about a college is what we will be listing about our work experience. Beneath the three basic pieces of information about each job, we will need to create a bulleted list of job responsibilities. If you remember from the beginning of this presentation, one of the things with formatting you wanted to make sure you kept consistent was the number of bullets in your list. This is the part where that bulleted list comes in, our job responsibilities, and you will see that as we move on to our example. Admittedly, you probably had a lot of responsibilities every time you've worked at any job, but you want to narrow down that list of responsibilities by matching them to the job that you're applying for right now. You want to focus on responsibilities that you imagine you will repeat at the new job, or responsibilities that you think that company would expect you to have in your background. Show them that you have experience in what they're expecting you to do, even if you haven't had that particular job yet. So let's go ahead and look at our example again as we begin to build our work experience part of our resume. You can still see the top of the resume is the same, our contact information and then our education section. As we move into the next part, the new part, we'll see another subheading that says experience, and then under that are listed 2 jobs. And each job is listed with 3 different bullets of job responsibilities. You'll see that the indentation is the same and consistent throughout each job. The information about the job is tabbed over once to 1/2 inch, and then the bulleted list of job responsibilities is tabbed over twice. That's 1 inch. Our first job, just to look at one of these together, we can see the layout of the information about that job. We have our job title first, library circulation page. We have the name of the business or the company that we were employed with. Here it's the public library. And we have the dates when we were employed there. So with this one, we began in 2010, and you'll see there's a little hyphen, and then the word current. If you are still employed at the position while you're looking for a new job, this is how you will note that on your resume. You'll end with current, meaning you're still working at that position as you're looking for your new position. With the second job that's listed here, the secretarial page, you will see that the year dates 2008 to 2009. That job ended in 2009, so that second year is present. Underneath of each of these 2 job listings is the bulleted list of responsibilities. Notice that they're short and that they use very specific language. For example, the first job responsibility under the first job reads, processed applications for library cards and attended to patron needs. So we're covering some of the information that might be done in the front of the business. The next one says assisted with check-in, check-out, and maintenance of library materials. And the third responsibility for that job, organized stacks and managed closing procedures. So these aren't even full sentences. They're just phrases, and they each begin with a strong verb. And we'll talk about verbs and word choice when we get to the end of this workshop. So 2 jobs here, you might have more than that. You might only have 1. However many job responsibilities you choose to list for each job, just make sure that they're the same. You might not have 3. You might just have 2 for each job that you want to focus on, or depending on how high level your job was, you might have more. You might have 3 or 4 or even 5 for each job. But try to keep it consistent. Another important thing to think about with your work experience is that you need to list your jobs in reverse chronological order. That means that your most recent job that you held or your current job will be first, and then you'll move backwards in time until you get to your oldest job. Now, one thing that people often ask is, do we need to list every job we've ever had? Not necessarily. You want to think about work experience that is related to the job you're applying for today if you have a long work history. If you have some jobs that maybe you didn't hold for very long and they aren't relevant to your position that you're looking for now, you might leave those off your experience section. But as long as you have 2 or 3 or 4 really significant jobs in this section, you're going to be okay even if you have more work experience in your past. So that's the work experience part of our resume. You'll see it's really the longest part, even though education comes first in this particular example. But after this, we're going to move into some other shorter sections. So for the fourth part of our resume, we want to include any additional activities or community involvement that we have. Anything that we've been involved in outside of our actual work hours. We want to include such activities as volunteer work, as well as any membership in clubs or societies, perhaps here at the college. When we're thinking about these kind of things, volunteer work, maybe you've helped to build a house for Habitat for Humanity, maybe you volunteer to cuddle kittens at one of the animal shelter clinic days. All of those things are great. As far as clubs or societies, again, anything that you're a member of here at the college, anything like that will fit perfectly into the involvement section. We do want to be careful with what we list in this part of our resume and make sure that we only include activities and community involvement that's relevant to the job that we are applying for. That's the biggest thing that we'll come back to, like I said, again and again, making sure that everything is appropriate for the specific job. So thinking back to our example of that volunteer work, maybe you do volunteer at the animal shelter, but if you're applying to work at a daycare, you might not want to include that as one of your volunteer opportunities in the past. Your potential employers might think you're trying to make a connection there between caring for animals and caring for children that they aren't going to be too pleased with. So think about how the volunteer work and the clubs and societies that you're a part of, how that's going to reflect on your potential to be employed in the position you're looking for. Are those things going to make you look like you're more qualified for your job, or are they going to serve as a distraction? You've got to be careful with this part as well as several of the others with our resume. But we're continuing to grow this document, so let's look at how this activities and involvement section will look as we begin to type it up. So we still have everything that we've worked on so far, and our next headed section we can see says activities involvement, and underneath of that for our example we just have one activity listed. We'll see that this is given in the same kind of series of information as the education and the experience. We have what we did, essentially our position. Here it says volunteer. If you were part of a club, if you were the president or the secretary or the treasurer of that club, you would list that instead of the word volunteer. But whatever you did for that activity, that's what you'll list first. Then you will give the name of the group or the event that you were helping with. Here we have World Book Night USA, and then include some degree of information about the date or perhaps the dates if you've worked with a particular volunteer organization for years that you have helped them out. So here it says April 2012. Then you'll notice after that bit of information there is a colon, and then just a very, very brief description of what that volunteer work entailed. Here it says distributed books to Adult Learning Center. You want to make sure that your descriptions of volunteer work are very brief, that they don't overpower your resume. Think about them as just single examples of the bullets that we did before under our work experience background. We're going to look at the next few parts of our resume in conjunction because they're usually brief, and you may not even include all three of these sections on your resume as you get ready to fill it out. So the next part of your resume, your fifth part, will be a list of any awards that you've earned. Again, it's important to consider whether the awards you've received are relevant to your job before you list them. If you don't have any appropriate awards, what you need to do is leave out this section of your resume. So as an example of an award, you want to think about things that you have earned, perhaps here at the college, any academic-based scholarships. If you, at your past jobs, have won any kind of special service recognition awards for being a good employee, those are the kinds of awards that you would want to list. But if we're thinking about something that is more from your private life, maybe you won the soapbox derby when you were 12, that's not necessarily the kind of award that we want to be considering when we write up our resume. Our employers aren't really going to be interested in that kind of award. Maybe if we're applying for some kind of engineering position, but you want to focus on awards that are relevant to the job. And again, if you don't feel like you have any relevant awards, you just leave this part out. Your future employer is going to be less likely to notice if you just leave the award section out than if you have the word awards there and then have nothing listed. So again, relevant awards, if you don't have any, just leave this part off your resume. The sixth part of the resume will be any additional skills that you have acquired. So things, again, outside of work, but that are important or relevant to the job you're applying for. Some of the skills you will want to consider including in your resume will be in categories like computers. If you have any additional computer skills, you want to make sure you list those on your resume. Computer skills are important, and they can put you ahead of the curve with the pool of possible employees that your resume is going up against. So think about things, fluency with software. If you're good with Microsoft Word or Outlook, anything like that, you're going to include that. Maybe you know how to build and manage a web page. That would be important information to put as computer skills. Maybe you even know a programming language. Anything that has to do with computers, list that in your skills section. Something else you might include would be any familiarity with languages other than English. Do make sure that you note how fluent you are in the language. Do you have just a basic working vocabulary of Spanish, or are you fully fluent in Spanish? But even if you just have a basic vocabulary of another language, include that in your skills section. Knowing a bit of another language can be very helpful and can give your resume the edge over someone else's. Other skills that you might include, if you have CPR certification, that might be something that you want to list in your skills, especially if we're applying for that daycare job. That might be something that employer is looking for us to get after we're employed, and if we already have it, that's less that they have to worry about, so that can give us an edge. Also, any special driver's license certifications, anything else that you would consider additional skills, list those in this part of your resume. Now, the last part of your resume can be a little bit tricky. Often at the end of a resume, we'll have a section called interests, but you should only ever include the interest section if the company asks you for your interests and if those interests are relevant to the job. So you always want to be very, very careful with this last section. If in doubt, just leave it off. Only if the company asks for it, only if your interests are relevant to the job. If you create an interest section and you're a huge fan of building and flying your own kites and you put that down there, that's not going to be relevant at all to, say, you're applying for a job at a bank. They might even think that you're going to want to cut out early every day to go fly your kite. So interests that are relevant to your job. Now, if you're applying for a job in IT and one of your interests is designing your own video games on the weekends, that might be a very relevant interest to include on your resume. But you want to keep these in line with skill sets that you might potentially use at the job, even if they are your own private interests. But be very, very careful with this section. If you include it and your employer doesn't see it as relevant, what you're listing there, it can actually seem like you're giving too much information. Think about things that you might tell someone when you first meet them, again within the context of what's relevant for this job. So let's go ahead and look at our example again. We will have filled out all of our resume at this point, including parts 5, 6, and 7 that we've looked at in this slide. So again, you can see those 3 new sections at the bottom. We have our awards. We have one award listed here. Notice that it's dated and the title of the award is given. Then we have our skills section. I've only listed one skill here for you, but you could list out as many as you wanted to. Notice that all the indentation is still staying the same. Everything lines up as we look up and down the page. And then in the interest section, you'll see that all I've left you is a little line of question marks. I want this to serve as a reminder for you to think about whether you even need to include this section in your resume or not. So if you don't include interest, you'll just take that off, but use those question marks to think, is this part of my resume really important? Is this going to help me get the job? So that's our finished resume. You can look at it all here, use it as an example as you're starting to construct your own. Pay attention to the indentation, the consistency of font and style throughout the entire piece, as well as the way you might start listing out the different sections of your own resume. Okay, so part 3 of our resume workshop is going to be maintenance of that resume and how to polish it up, make it something really special. The first thing that you want to think about is maintaining the quality of your resume. Your job search might be long, and you want to make sure that you're always keeping track of what's on your resume. I suggest that you update it at least once a month. So set a day of the month, the 1st, the 30th, whatever day that you want, when you always go to your computer, open up that file with your resume, and read through it. Make sure that everything on there is up to date. Maybe you've gained a new skill since the last time you looked at your resume. Add that to your skills section. Maybe you have achieved your degree, and when you very first set up your resume, you had to have your expected date. Make those changes. And also, even if you just checked it a few days ago, always read back through your resume before you send it to each new job application. Sometimes it can take us rereading information multiple times before we catch all of the little mistakes that are in there. It's also important to make sure all your dates are up to date, so always read it before you hit print. Don't just open that resume, attach it to an email, print it out and put it in the mail without reading it. Always reread it before you give it to anyone. Okay, as far as polishing our resume, this is when we're really starting to think about language. You make sure that you use spelling and grammar check, and do this in 2 ways. First, take advantage of the spelling and grammar check that is available to you through Microsoft Word. There is a spelling and grammar check, and that will catch a lot of things. But most of you have probably already come up against an instance where you used the spell check and you still ended up with some kind of error in your paper. So always make sure that you also have somebody else, another human being, read over your work. Find someone that you trust, a family member, a friend, possibly someone else that you're working with at the job you have right now. Have somebody else read over it. The machine can catch a lot, but sometimes it really does take another person to make sure that all the words make sense, that everything is really working the way that you want it to. So check it twice. Check it on your computer, and then check it again by having a person read it for you. Okay, you also want to make sure that you focus on specific language. You want language that is active, which means it's performing action. You also want to think about using language that mirrors what's in the job listing whenever that's possible. So by mirroring the language of the job listing, say that the job you're looking at in the actual ad where you saw it, it says that it is wanting an employee who is engaging and self-reliant. Well, try to use those words in your own job responsibility descriptions. Maybe one of our bullets under a job could say that you engaged incoming customers. So we're using that. We're taking where they said they wanted us to be engaging, and we're showing how we were engaging at our previous job. This shows that you understand what they're looking for and that you've taken the time to really read their ad in detail. So repeat their language whenever you can throughout the course of your resume. As far as active language, that means really getting yourself into the action. Instead of saying something like, one of my responsibilities was to answer the phone, okay, that's just kind of making the job responsibility secondary. Say that I answered the phone. Make it immediate. Make yourself performing the action. But again, in a lot of these, we're really focusing on not even complete sentences, so we're putting that verb first. You also want to think about verb forms. Whenever possible, as the example at the bottom of the screen shows, avoid what we call the gerund form of verbs. That's really just a fancy way of saying verbs that end in ing. So instead of saying answering the phone, try something with a bit of a stronger word and use a verb that ends in ed. Managed and processed incoming calls. We want to avoid that gerund because that ing ending, it can end up sounding a little bit weak. It sounds like something that's still going on right now, that's what it means. And it even sounds, as you read it out loud, a bit whiny. Answering, it doesn't sound as strong. Managed, processed, those ed verbs, they sound powerful, they sound strong, they sound like you did something important. Also, make sure that you're choosing really adequate verbs. Make sure that you try to get as specific as you can with them and make your job sound important. Instead of just answered the phone, managed and processed incoming calls. It may sound like you're overwriting a little bit, but it really can help you make an even better first impression. So language is important in your resume. Yes, this is a document that attempts to convey information, but your impression is going to be based on the way that you're presenting that information. So focus on format, focus on language, make sure that you have a winning resume whenever you apply for a new job. So thank you for being with us today for our resume writing workshop. Hopefully this will help you out in your job hunt. Again, I'm Danielle Ryle, and thank you for being with us today, sharing this workshop and this information. Good luck with everything in your future and with the job that I'm sure you'll be able to find. Have a great day.